here we are. The review for Blood Hunt. First of all, welcome back to the doctor's office. I am Dr. Kaori Knight, here to give you the proper diagnosis and prognosis of everything comics and comic book characters. And today is the day that I talk to you guys about Blood Hunt. Spoiler alert, I'm about to spoil all this shit. Just a basic overview. If it seems like I am in shock, it's because I am. Honestly and truly. When I first read Blood Hunt and just reading, and I get to the end of Blood Hunt, number 1, I screamed in my room so loud because I was like, what? Because just the ending itself was crazy. I know if you guys were here on the channel on Monday that you saw the video for the background reading. And here we are at this main story. So what I'm going to do is the prelude that came out for Free Comic Book Day. I'm going to do the Vengeance of the Moon Knight number 5. And then all of that ultimately leads into Blood Hunt number 1. So starting off with the prelude, the Blood Hunt prelude, we have Fantastic Four. Reed Richards is looking at all of these things and he's trying to figure out where all of these dimensional rifts are coming from. And Sue, who's like, I think it's the dark dimension. Prior to that, Spider-Man is fighting someone who is a user of the dark energy and whatnot, the dark dimension. And he is fighting him and he goes to punch him to just finish it all. And the guy throws up this black liquid essentially and starts turning into a portal. Then we go forward and people who are connected to the dark dimension, so it would be Cloak, Shroud, Dark Star, Silhouette, which brings in mutants as well. Now after the Fantastic Four appears, we switch over back to New York. Essentially, we are at Hell's Kitchen and Daredevil, his senses are kind of going everywhere because he can hear people screaming, but he's not exactly sure 100% what's going on until he gets there and just starts fighting fucking hordes of vampires. So we now have Daredevil in the mix. And then we have Brielle, who is walking home from school, but as she says in here, she never leaves home without taking the stuff to help run the family biz. And she's trying to do right by her dad because, okay, again, if you watched the kind of breakdown of the background reading, Blade did end up training her. And she's actually holding her own. She's doing very good. She's by herself. And she's doing very good. And she should be in Atlanta. Last time she was with her dad, they teamed up with Miles Morales when they went to New York. And so she's holding her own. She's doing really, really well. And the surprise show up is Dracula. Shows Dracula in full armor, and it's the armor from the Blade series when Blade came to him for help going up against the Adana. And he has his sword and he is out there killing vampires as well. When I tell you, I was like, excuse me? Oh my god. It was beautiful. Segueing into the tie-in, which is the Vengeance of the Moon Knight number 5. So Moon Knight, Mark Spector, died in the Moon Knight series. He sacrificed himself, and this is after he killed the tutor who was the leader of the Structure. And as I said in that video as well, the Structure was is a cult of vampires with the tutor sitting at the head of it, and they had some powerful people. And he was really trying to get the attention of, he was either trying to get the attention of Dracula or he was trying to build an army strong enough to take on Dracula. So that is where that happened in Moon Knight. So Moon Knight is dead, but the Midnight Mission has acquired Shroud as well as April. And April is talking to Mark Spector's old therapist, and he's basically just trying to understand the type of person he is now, because he is with the Midnight Mission. And the Midnight Mission is what Mark Spector built. He built it with Hunter's Moon, and he built it with Tigra, and he built it with Reese, and he built it with Soldier. So he's trying to figure, A-Ball is trying to figure out where does he fit. And he spends a lot of this time talking about how when Moon Knight lost everything, he still wanted to be better. And he was talking about how like everybody was terrified of Moon Knight and still is, and how Moon Knight is like this just huge badass and left behind this legacy, and he does not want to tarnish it. And she asked him, she's like, do you think you're a superhero? And he's like, no, I don't know, but I do know the type of person I want to be, because if Moon Knight can lose everything, then and still want to be better, I can want that for myself too. And a couple of funny moments in there when he was talking about how villains used to be afraid of Moon Knight, and he said between Moon Knight and Punisher, Moon Knight was the scary one, because, or the scariest one, because Punisher would at least just shoot you. And we all know Moon Knight is not for that. Moon Knight is going to torture you if he can. So that is what's going on in the now section of that book. In the then section, we have Shroud, who has been pretending to be Moon Knight and essentially fucking up Moon Knight's legacy. And Tigra and Hunter's Moon are tired of it. So they actually end up confronting and fighting with him, and because they know who he is, that they finally figured out who is pretending to be Moon Knight and they know who he is, he's not going to let them get away. And he was basically just like, he's having a mental breakdown is exactly what's happening, because Moon Knight, he says him and Moon Knight were friends, and Moon Knight is dead, and Moon Knight was the only one who actually understood him, because Moon Knight lost everything, and like he had lost everything, but he was missing key pieces of the story that Tigra ended up giving him the speech of the fucking century by telling him, you know, what you're doing is destroying everything that he built, and he built it off the fact that he lost everything. He lost a woman named Marlene and his daughter. Like he understands loss. He understood loss, and he had me and he had Hunter's Moon, and we built this shit together. So after Tigra tells him about himself, he starts to feel like where she's coming from, and he was like, I wanted to be like him so bad. He really was like my friend, and she feels it. She loved Moon Knight. Like, he's her ex. She loved that man. Like, so she understands where you're coming from, right? But then he starts to, like, when they're trying to leave, he starts to like feel sick, and then he turns into a portal, and that is when they start getting attacked by vampires, and 8-Ball and Reese and Soldier decide to go out and help, because, you know, everybody's outside. And that's how that one segues into actual Blood Hunt. All of the people who have like powers that stem from the dark dimension have been turned into these portals in something called the Sun Death, and it is exactly what it sounds like. And everybody is fighting. Everybody's fighting everywhere. Scarlet Witch shows up trying to see what's going on, but she can't close the portal with her magic. It's not working, and Tony is trying to figure out if it's this magic or science, and vampires are literally everywhere. And the quick-witted back and forth between Wanda and Tony It's actually very entertaining. So it kind of skips over to Brooklyn, where Miles Morales is fighting vampires, and he says to himself, what would Blade do? And his spidey senses are tingling, of course, and Blade comes out and he basically says, I have a plan and I need you to do something. I don't like that. And I will tell you why I don't like that. But we'll continue. So the Avengers are trying to figure out what the hell is going on. Like, they're trying to figure out who they're fighting. And Blade comes in on the comms and is like, hey, I'm on the run. I have information. I need to meet with y'all ASAP right now. Like, let's go to Impossible City. And so Impossible City, I think Tony's already up there. Impossible City transports the Avengers to it, as well as locking onto his coordinates and pulling that truck up into Impossible City. However, Blade is not the one who gets out of that truck. It is, in fact, the Blood Coven. Very interesting, don't you think? What the hell? So the Blood Coven gets out of the truck and they are assigned specific to people. So when the Blood Coven comes out of this truck, Cruel and Unusual are assigned to Wanda. He says take the witch first. And then Damascene is assigned to Thor. And Smoke Eater and Bloodstorm 1 are just assigned in general. So the thing is that they feed off of ghosts, magic, chaos, things like that, and pain. And they were specifically, as these two people were specifically supposed to be taken out first. Scarlet Witch, Wanda, which means Scarlet Witch and Wanda, or Scarlet Witch and Thor, which means those two people pose the biggest threat. So they take Wanda. I think Wanda is actually still alive. Thor is cut by Damascene, which he is surprised by because he isn't really one to just be easily cut. And Bloodstorm 1 specifically wants to go after Sam, who is Captain America, because they need a symbol. And Captain America as their symbol, as the vampire symbol, would be perfect. And so that is one with this Bloodstorm 1's prize. And then Smoke Eater is to go after, or decides to go after Captain Marvel. And then Cruel is also going after Tony. Damascene took out Vision, or stabbed him anyway, and stabbed him out of intangibility, by the way. And they're getting their ass beat. They are. And Cruel is also inside of Impossible City, taking Impossible City down. And so T'Challa asks that Impossible City get them out of there, starting with Sam. And he gets impaled by Bloodstorm 1, who's like, you can't take my prize, I won't let you. But of course, Impossible City transports them out of their emergency evac. So the ones that survived that attack up there are Captain Marvel, Captain America, Iron Man, and Vision. Wanda was beaten by Unusual and taken. And T'Challa was impaled in the chest and taken. And Thor had one of Damascene's projectiles in his brain and taken, because he was like, you're not going to kill me. And they're like, kill you? What a waste. We want to have you. Like, please, we need you to be with us. So those three have been taken. So then we have Blade going to talk to Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange and his wife Clea Clea's basically like, we need to get the hell out there. Like, they need our help. And he was like, we do, but if we can complete the Montesi formula, then this is all over immediately. And then Blade comes from the shadows and is like, oh, the formula where it's that spell that kills every single vampire, you do that. And he's like, hey, by the way. And they're like, hey, you know, sup? And they're just looking through everything, trying to figure out, you know, like what they need to do. So he's like, you know, where, like, what are we up against? Like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, you know, it's this faction called the Structure, and their leader was killed, but they found a new leader, a leader who has a plan. And so, of course, logically speaking, he was like, are we talking about Dracula? And Blade's like, no. And on top of that, when the Avengers were out fighting vampires and they were trying to figure out what was going on, Vision said that Dracula was unaccounted for. Dracula is with Brielle. Okay? So, he's accounted for, but not accounted for. So, they didn't know that he was with Brielle. Anywho, so he's like telling about the Structure and basically what the plan was. The plan was to blot out the sun and make it completely dark. Then the second part of the plan was to unleash these crazed maniac vampires literally everywhere simultaneously and just have them start fucking destroying everything. The third part of this plan was to take out the Avengers, because this would be an Avenger level threat essentially, because I mean, Blade knows about that because he was with the Avengers when the Vampire Civil War was happening. So this would be an Avenger level threat, and when you're dealing with an Avenger level threat, you need to take out the Avengers. Now, when he says this, Clea and Strange are like, bro, what the fuck? And she's like, no way. Like, the Avengers make sense. And he was like, the Blood Coven, how do you know their name, is a match for them. And he's like, and I'm not even like playing around. The Avengers are down. How do you know that? How do you know that, Blade? And he was like, and Doctor Strange was like, well, it's all the more important that we figure out that Montesi formula with what we have, because the Montesi formula originally needed the Darkhold, but Wanda swallowed it. And Blade does point that out. And he said, and Blade goes, you'd really do that? You would wipe out all of the vampires? He's like, some of them are on your side, are they not? And Doctor Strange is like, I'm a doctor. If I have to lose a limb to save the body, I will do that. And he's like, you know, I wasn't sure about you. I knew that Wanda wasn't going to just erase an entire race of people, because that's not in her. It's not. She didn't do an entire race of mutants, just almost all of them. Anyway, but she felt bad and brought them back. Anyway, he's like, I knew Wanda wouldn't do it. I wasn't sure about you, though. And it's really weird that Blade is sitting here talking like this. And that's when he's just continues speaking weirdly. And he's like, you want to know who planned this all out? You want to know who the real leader of the Structure is? Because it ain't Dracula. It's me. And then in the regular Blood Hunt version, he stabs Doctor Strange in the chest. In the Red Band version, he cuts him in half and his entrails all over the place. So, you know. I was shocked. He came in talking weird as hell. And when he called for the Avengers to go to Impossible City and the Blood Coven hopped out of that truck, I said, no. No. This isn't real. It cannot be. Y'all. Now, going back to the beginning when I said I did not like what he had to say to Spider-Man, because he said to Spider-Man, I have a plan and I have something for you to do. I don't like that. I don't like that because what do you mean? What did you do to him? Because he doesn't appear later on at all. And it's kind of hard to think about, considering how well they teamed up when him and Brielle went out there. Now, just a couple of other points. The first step that he mentions in this is an antediluvian Atlantean ritual to make Dark Force users turn into portals to blot out the sun. So he would have to be either directly talking to someone skilled in Atlantean rituals like this one, or he would have had to have done extensive research in order to know what that is. And he has magic now. Like, he can do magic now. Again, in the background reading, when he gave Miles Morales the vampire hunting suit, he used a spell for that. And when they were going up against Raimier, he used a spell to lock Raimier in like this ancient artifact thing. So he uses magic now. You know, do you see where I'm getting at? Another thing I would like to point out is the Dracula and Brielle situation. Now, Dracula does talk to him in, I believe, the single shot, either the single shot Blade Vampire Nation one, or in the Blade series. In one of those books, he does talk about Brielle. And for him to come to Brielle's aid specifically is very interesting, considering there is a 3-issue tie-in Dracula, Blood Hunt Dracula, that happens also. And he's in full armor, which means he either knew this was going to happen or he had some sort of idea, because Blade did drink his blood and became increasingly aggressive. And in that series, after, like, before he goes to defeat the Adana, Tulip and Rotha were very concerned about his just sudden aggressiveness. Again, they didn't know that he had drank Dracula's blood. So Dracula coming to Brielle, I feel like he knew Blade had something to do with this. And mentioning the structure losing their leader, which is what happened in Moon Knight number 18 when Moon Knight killed him, is also interesting, because it sounds like Blade has been tied up in this for a minute. And it also sounds like the Adana has not been killed properly, because it just felt too easy at the end of that. At the end of that Blade series, when that assassin killed her with the Lightbringer, it felt too simple. Now, of course, we are just at the beginning, so we can't make too many speculations. There are 7 tie-in issues that drop on May the 8th, as you can see. And I will be getting those, reading those, and reviewing those, so that, you know, if you're not really interested in buying and reading the tie-ins, I will do it for you. I got you. The legwork is all mine, and it is a pleasure to do so, because I am obsessed with all of these tie-ins. One of the things with the tie-ins is the X-Men are also involved in this situation. And with the X-Men being involved in this situation, it's 4 X-Men stories specifically. It's Wolverine, Magic, Jubilee, and Laura, the Wolverine. And it's Jubilee's past as a vampire coming back. Now, if you remember, back in 2010, there was an entire storyline where Wolverine and Jubilee returned into vampires. And Jubilee was a vampire for a while. And then we also have the Blade versus Wolverine story, where a genetic clone was made from Wolverine's skin, and he was a vampire with bone claws. And that story was not necessarily like important, but to have Wolverine have a one shot as part of Blood Hunt, and it's like a faction that's going after him specifically. What are you going after him for? You know what I'm saying? So, like, all of the tie-ins, while it is a lot, honestly, it's literally like 60 books, just about. This story is intense. How are we feeling? I am so excited for this, because this is a really huge story, and it involves literally everybody. And I'm very interested to see where it goes, because for you to drop 2 bombshells, one being Blade being the orchestrator of such an elaborate plot, considering how much he hates vampires, is crazy. Dracula coming in full armor to the assistance of his sworn enemy's daughter is also a bombshell to me, because why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Because you could have ignored this entire situation. Another thing, Doctor Doom is also involved in this, but he's basically whoever takes sanctuary in Latveria from these vampires are welcome there. And there were 2 people who are running from vampires, and they were like, we can't go in there. And he's like, we have to, there's nowhere other place to go. And the vampires like burst into flames like as soon as they cross that border. So he has Latveria protected. So that's also really interesting to see, considering the Fantastic Four also have a tie-in. So this is crazy. This is ambitious. This is bold. And I am very excited to see where this goes. I would say that I am very shocked by this, but I'm not. Marvel loves to do big stories, big crossovers and things like that. So I'm not shocked by this, especially since they have been planting the seeds for officially 3 years. But according to all of the things, it's been going on longer than that, because vampires have existed in the Marvel Universe for forever. And the fact that we're going back to a time with a tie-in. We're going back to a time where Jubilee was a vampire, and you can also include when Wolverine was a vampire, and you can also include the background information on the Vampire Nation that started in Captain Britain and MI13 back in 2008. Like, they have officially been planning this particular story for 3 years, but as a whole, it's been going on for a long time. And I am just very excited to see what they do with this. Again, we have 7 tie-ins dropping on May 8th. I think we have 3 or 4 dropping on May 15th, and then book 2 for Blood Hunt, the main story, drops on May 22nd. So you will be getting a lot of content from me. I want to get it out as it's happening, just so I can keep you guys informed, just in case you guys are not for, going to buy it, which is understandable, of course. So that is it for this episode of The Doctor's Office. And once you get out of shock, I will see you guys next week.